Hello and welcome again to Conscious TV. I'm Iain McNay, and today we have another programme in our series about the Enneagram. And this time we're talking with some Type 9s. And we have 3 Type 9s in the studio. We have Dottie. Hi, Dottie.
Hi.
And Sam and Cate. And we're going to start with you, Dottie. If you could just tell us a little bit about the Enneagram for people that don't know much about it who are watching this programme. What is the Enneagram?
Okay. As I understand it, and I think the Enneagram is one of these things that is out there and open for anyone really to interpret in whatever way they choose. But so as I understand it, say when we're born, and maybe before we're born, when we're still in the womb, after we're born, we start interacting with our environment. And in that interaction with our environment, we start building up patterns of behaviour, building up programs, and over time, these programs will develop into what we think we are or who we think we are. So it's our personality is mainly developed through our interaction with the environment. What the Enneagram does, it offers a model which has 9 basic personality types.
So everybody has to be one of these 9 pretty much?
Everyone is basically one of these 9, but the other thing about the Enneagram is that the symbol of the Enneagram is a circle. And so there can be movement within that circle. So although you are basically one type, there is movement within the circle. You are not just defined by a list of this is who you are. There is movement within that circle.
So in the other types, we'd also find part of ourselves. It's just that with you guys, like Type 9, you're mainly Type 9.
Mainly Type 9.
Yeah.
And I think when we talk a bit more about the 9, looking at what the driver is behind the 9 behaviour, why the 9 behaviour is as it is. So that to me is the fundamental, is finding what the driver is, what it is that makes you be the 9, what's driving that personality.
Okay.
So through studying the Enneagram, hopefully you find your type. Some people it's really easy. Certainly for me, as soon as I read the 9, I knew that was me. Some people have no idea, and it takes them time to actually, they really need to visit all the different types to find out which one actually fits most comfortably for them. And one of the common things that you feel when you first find your type in the Enneagram is some people say, I thought everybody felt like me, and they find out that they don't. Or completely the opposite, that they realise that some people feel like me, but actually some people feel completely different to me. And that understanding of not just yourself, but getting that understanding about other people as well, is really helpful in your life. But I find the Enneagram does not define you. I think some people see it as something that can actually give you a definition, you are a 9. I don't think the Enneagram defines you. You find how much you have defined yourself. And at the same time, you find how much you have defined other people. And that gives you more compassion and understanding both for yourself and actually for others too.
So it can help in your relationships with other people,
very
can't
much
you?
So.
Yeah. Very
much so, yes. So initially it's this is all about me and it's fascinating, but then you learn about how other people are different and you understand what's driving them. So that leads to much improved relationships.
Because if you understand someone else better, then you can to some extent put yourself in their shoes.
Absolutely.
And you realise why they are the way they are.
Yes.
And the way they are with you.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I see the Enneagram as you can take it at whatever level you want. It can be a self-development, self-awareness tool. But for me, it's more about I've gone through it. It's more about the spiritual aspect and actually the potential for transformation.
Okay, so we'll come on to that later, the potential for the expansion, the potential, yeah. So, how did you first hear about the Enneagram, Sam?
I was living in Thailand in a Buddhist monastery, actually, as a monk, and we were introduced to it there as a tool for learning more about ourselves, and we used it as a community, where some of us were more into it than others, just to look at our interactions with each other and why, how we could improve our interactions, and very, very, very helpful, and complementary with the meditation and the study of the Buddha's teachings as well. So yes, and I've used it, studied it fairly, I don't want to say intensely, but studied it quite a bit and used it a bit there, and then eventually came to England and was did a course with Judith Priest and Tim Lucock. And in my marriage, it's been very useful. My relationship with my wife, who's a type 4, just being able to unpick why things might be going wrong and see how I'm contributing to the dysfunction or the odd dynamic. That's, very, very, very useful tool.
So when you were in the Buddhist monastery, were you interacting with the other monks there and discussing your types?
Yes, both formally, sometimes in workshops, but also just as we were interested in it, we would use it a bit to look at the dynamics. So.
Because the image I have of Buddhist monks is they keep themselves very much to themselves and they meditate a lot and don't speak much. But obviously, this was quite a modern monastery in one way, was it?
Yeah, I mean, the man who introduced it, the monk who introduced it to us, Santikaro, who's now in America, and not a monk anymore either, saw it as a tool for spiritual development. And I remember him saying once, actually, this may be as useful as meditation, and as useful as the Buddha's teachings, but definitely as a complementary thing, very helpful.
Because when you're meditating for long periods a day, then you can get very lost, can't you, in kind of your inner world, and this must give you more of perspective.
Yeah. And as solitary and relatively quiet as we were, we still came together to do a bit of work and around meal times and projects on the outside. So it's very useful.
Cate, I know you've been working with the Enneagram for a long time now as part of the school you're in, I think almost 20 years. So how do you find you've changed during that time using the information you learnt about the Enneagram?
Well, I notice I'm not going to answer your question directly first.
Okay.
Because listening to what you asked Sam, I realised the relief of reading about the Enneagram and feeling that somebody really understood what it felt like inside. And it was actually, I think, Facets of Unity, written by Hamid or A.H. Almas, that really, how he understood the sense of deficiency and lack, in a way, was just such a huge relief. And recognising that, which are still a lot of the traits I have, like to go towards the other more than think of myself, because that's a way of not feeling the emptiness and being fascinated by other people. And that's how I felt, was by relating to other people.
So what do you mean by not feeling the emptiness?
By well, I think what I'm learning, and it's still in process, is that going towards others is my nature in a way, but not negating myself at the same time. And what is difficult for me is to stay with myself when I'm with another, and to really feel into myself. That's what I find.
So you lose your own kind of, not agenda so much, but your own desire or what you would like to do when you're with somebody else. You get pulled into their.
What your desire is. I mean, I just lose that, and it's. I always remember the first time that I really noticed how much I did this was driving. This was years ago, and driving with somebody who I was a bit frightened of, actually. She was an 8, and it was when we were running a centre, and I was driving her along, and as usual, asking her a mass of questions, which was very interesting. And she suddenly said, "And what about you?" And I couldn't get out of the car and escape this question, and it was terrifying. So it's just the focus on myself is frightening in a way, and I'm getting much better at staying, I
So
hope.
it's frightening because it's unfamiliar and you don't know how to deal with it.
I suppose for a long time it was so difficult to feel myself, and the only way I could feel filled was by sort of going out towards the other.
Okay, yeah.
And I think even before I'd done any spiritual work, I always remember my biggest fear was to be in solitary confinement. And I thought, what am I going to do if I've just got me? And so I think what's helping more and more is the work I've done with in the Diamond approach.
Yes.
And also more recently, doing more meditation with Dan Brown, pointing the way. And because before in meditation, I would just sit and come to the most wonderful, spacious place, and very smooth, very calming. And having to be more alert is really helping me.
Okay. So taking that to you, Sam, that issue that like you were in a monastery where you're very much encouraged to stay with your process, were you able to develop what was right for Sam when you were given that space?
Possibly a bit. I think I started to wake up to the fact that it was more comfortable for me to sort of stay in that spaciousness, as you called it. I remember once, or a period of realizing that there was this great feeling of just inner peacefulness, a sort of inner smile, and for a long time I mistook that as what it's all about. And actually for nines, it's for me, and I think for most nines, it's not about that. It's about knowing what I actually want, knowing my agenda, as you put it, when I'm with other people, and being able to act on that, and not feeling like I just have to put it all aside and go with what the other person wants, but really knowing in the first place and then acting on it, acting on what I feel.
So Dottie, what are the other sort of factors people might want to look for if they think they might be number 9 who are watching Type 9, if they're watching this programme? What are the clues?
If I can describe where I think the driver of the 9 is, and it's looking at the essence of the being of the 9, in a sense, again, going back to birth or maybe before birth, and that the belief that we are all loved unconditionally. There's this sense of everyone being loved in a state of unity, sort of almost like a non-duality. So that's the perfect essence that we move further and further away from as we develop our personality.
And we move further away because that's the way the rest of the world is. Is that right?
Yeah, because that's what we learn, and that's how our life is. You start off being educated, being domesticated by your parents. You pick up all the societal beliefs, and that's who you think you are. But underneath it, this desire for the sense of being loved and in unity is still there.
Okay.
So what the 9 then does is they then try and recreate what that feels like, that sense of love and unity, and kindness, and they try and recreate that in the way they live their lives. So they will do anything to avoid conflict. They make themselves invisible because that gives everybody else space. And this is how they are trying to create that love. But it all goes a bit wonky because the 9 goes into this state of being asleep to themselves, it's described. There's not knowing what I think, not knowing what I want, not knowing what I feel, but finding it so easy to tune into someone else, nines merge with other people. You know what other people are thinking. You know what they need before they do.
They're both nodding
They're
enthusiastic.
nodding. So you do it. You
enthusiastically
find
there,
that you are then, to some extent, almost living vicariously.
Yes.
Because you're living through somebody else. So recognising that isn't what you're not actually returning to, that wonderful initial state. You're making a sort of false copy of it, and it's
Okay.
recognising that,
Yeah.
and then going, oh, okay, this is who I really am,
Yes.
and starting to wake up to who you are, to recognise when you do fall asleep. And personally, at times, when I first discovered the Enneagram, I realised that if I'd got something challenging to do, I would actually start feeling really, really tired. And I could almost fall asleep. And I'd think, oh, I'm so tired, I have to go and lie down. And to realise I'm not really tired. I'm just avoiding something here,
Yes.
because it's going to upset this sort of equilibrium that I've created for myself.
So it must be quite a shock when you realise that you created this kind of false image in a way.
Absolutely. But it's a shock, but I think, as Cate was saying, and probably Sam as well, it's a revelation that actually somebody else feels like this. It's not just me. I'm not lazy. I'm not all these negative labels we put on ourselves. It's not about being lazy. It's about this lack of self-awareness, and to actually start realising I can do something about it. I don't have to fall asleep. When I first started meditating, I would literally go to sleep.
But yeah, big problem.
Yes, whether that's particularly for nines, I think it can be for anyone. But the nine, yes, wonderful space. You can just it's the duvet thing, isn't it? That's the real nine under the duvet.
And what you were saying about not just not knowing what you feel. I remember when I was little, my family asking me, "But what are you thinking, Sam? What are you feeling?" And just not having any, being really frustrated because I couldn't answer that question. I don't know. And my wife, who's a 4, she's extremely in touch with her feelings and just can't get that. How come you can't say what you're feeling? So that's very typical. I think another thing that's fairly typical is I speak for myself. You all are probably enlightened or highly evolved, but nines can spend a lot of energy dissipating anger.
Absolutely.
And just spending a lot of energy not appearing anger. But it's a very powerful force.
What you're saying is you feel anger, but you don't really put it out there so people can recognise it. Is that what you're saying?
People, I think, especially people who know you well, do sense it coming off of you. But I am not.
So you hold it back.
Hold it back.
Yeah.
There was one. It's a dream I had once where a very dark character who I knew in the dream only came out at night. And he wasn't evil, but he was really strong and powerful. I went to meet him. He was scary, and I woke up from that dream and was writing my dreams down at this point, and wrote, I must meet this character, and it was this
It's almost like the shadow for Jung,
Yeah.
isn't it? This aspect of yourself you don't want to acknowledge.
Yeah, and later, I did meet him in a way in something that happened about a week later in my life, and I was able to express for the first time feeling very pinched between two people who I was very close to, and I'd been pinched for years. I couldn't. One person would run the other person down with me, and then the other person would do the same with the other, and I felt very squeezed in the middle. And I was tired of just understanding them and not expressing how it actually felt. And I was able to express that for the first time in 15 years, and it was fantastic. And it really shifted something in me, and also shifted something in the whole dynamic.
So when you say it was fantastic, what was the feeling then?
I don't have to hide anymore. I don't have to keep my feeling or my understanding of a situation to myself. What I say matters. What I feel matters, and I can express that, and it's valid. And actually, it's essential in the functioning of my relationship with those other people.
I agree now that's happening, but I remember the first few times. For me, anger, my partner in particular used to say, "You're angry," and I used to say, "I'm not angry," and then 5 minutes later I thought, I jolly well am angry. But what happened for me the first few times I got angry, it was terrifying. I mean, I didn't feel that sense of, you know, it was more like I totally destroyed them. The guilt afterwards. And what I realised was I only got angry when I was pushed to the, you know, I could accommodate, and then suddenly it was all too much. And so it came out in a very, I couldn't believe it was me. And now I'm beginning to be able to do what you've done. But I don't think anger for me is still easy.
It's not easy for me either.
No.
Hate it. Really.
Yeah.
There's anger and there's losing your temper,
Yes.
isn't there?
Yes.
So actually being able to say, you're making me really angry.
Exactly, it's very different to
actually going, "Brrr."
yes, that it's sort of counting out.
Because
Yeah.
I find with the nines, because we're so accommodating,
Yeah.
that people think that's the way we are, and they can go on doing
Yeah,
it. So
yeah.
if they push you and push you and push you, and certainly take advantage of your good nature, that's when you can go into this passive aggressive, and the aggressive starts to come out. And also, I don't know if you guys are the same, but you can be really, really stubborn.
Yes.
People think you're so easygoing, and then all of a sudden you'll just dig your heels in. They won't be able to move you.
Yeah.
Going slow and
Yeah.
just
Not
pretending
gonna be
not to
rude.
understand.
Yes. Yeah.
So I wrote down a few kind of, from a couple of books, a few clues for people that might still not be clear whether they might be a type 9 or not. So I'll just read them all through, and you might want to sort of grunt or comment or something. Often feel in union with nature and people.
Yes.
Yeah. Making choices can be very difficult. We've kind of covered that. Hard to know what they want when they're with other people. Again, we've covered that really. This is a quote. Others see me as peaceful, but inside I often feel anxious. Is that something you...
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. When there's unpleasantness around me, I just try to think about something else. Is that something you guys connect with? Or?
Yeah, I think we're quite into diversionary tactics of doing something else or thinking something else. If we're in a challenging situation,
Yeah.
And that might
or just
be
zone out.
or losing yourself in detail of work or small, easy tasks instead of addressing the bigger stuff that might, in your mind, lead to conflict or lead to difference of opinions.
And then you get stubborn when you feel controlled.
Yes.
Yeah. Tend to put things off to the last minute, but usually get them done in the end.
Yes.
Yeah.
Procrastination.
So you're all ticking the boxes here.
Yes. Yes.
I don't know if there's anything on that list about. I mean, for me, I've noticed this paradox of wanting to avoid conflict, but in the attempt to avoid it, actually creating it. If I can think of an example. Well, just if there's a difference of opinion, if I feel like in a situation, if I have a difference of opinion, rather than just expressing that, I'll agree with the other person, go along with them, decide to do something, and then down the road, a few days or weeks, I can't sustain that position of theirs that I've taken up, and so in the attempt to avoid conflict, I've actually created it, and it's a pain.
Well, you've actually taken that into yourself in order to keep the peace.
Yeah.
But the conflict has remained within you. That's where you say you've actually generated conflict. It's in you. They're quite happy because you're agreeing with them.
Yeah, they think, and then it blows up.
Yeah.
They say, well, why didn't you
say that?
Yeah. But the 9s are also known as the peacemakers as well. So you obviously have this quality of being able to get together parties that are not getting on and to help be the catalyst for
both
peace.
sides.
Yes.
And, yes.
Because it's very easy to tune into other people. We can pick up the vibe, if you like, about what's going
Yes.
on, and therefore, not in a manipulative way, but actually steer things to a more peaceful space. But it's because we can pick them up.
Okay, so you're really feeling how they feel, and you
Yes.
can understand their
Yes.
mindset.
Yes.
And then somewhere also, I presume, appears a kind of clues of how you can bring them together more
Yes.
in common interests
Yes.
and
Well,
things.
you're looking for a common ground. If you've got two
Yes.
people standing opposite, you actually look for the common ground that everyone can stand in. Is that sort of
Yes,
sense?
that's a
really.
great quality, actually. Yeah.
Well, we've said a lot of negative things about nines, haven't we? But there are lots of positive things
Yeah.
about being a nine.
Well, I know. With Sam, you actually work. I don't know how much you want to talk about it now, but you work for an organisation called the Prison Phoenix Trust. In fact, you run the organisation in the UK, which helps to teach meditation and yoga in prisons to prisoners. So you must find quite a lot of conflict situations come up, and I presume you find your sort of type 9 peacemaker ability helps in those situations.
Well, I think in any situation where you're leading or managing people, it's a great skill to have. But the challenge is to not only try to go with that easy skill of tuning into what other people think, but knowing what you think and putting that into the equation. If you don't have that, then it's difficult.
You're still swimming around without an anchor somehow without that, aren't you? You've got to
yeah.
find your own anchor. Yeah.
Exactly, and know how you feel and what your take is.
Does that take an effort on your part, Sam, to actually think, okay, what is my stand here?
It does.
So
take an effort.
it's a conscious thing. It's not an automatic thing. You have to think, okay, where am I?
It does take effort, and one thing that helps me is to think at the beginning of each day, or maybe the beginning of each week, what is important to me, because I know I'll be hit with all kinds of other pulls from other people and situations arising, and I can very easily get drawn off what is actually important to me. So yes, it takes effort. It's not something that I can easily remember what's important.
Yeah, something else that I wrote down from my notes was the type 9s are often non-judgmental and accepting. Is that something you all feel you have that?
Yes, it's all part of the same thing, really,
Yes,
isn't it? It's actually
yeah.
trying to have this environment where everything is nice and there's no conflict.
And then you can feel much better.
Yeah.
Yes.
As long as everybody else is
Yes,
happy. then
yes.
you can feel
But if it's genuinely non-judgmental, that's really quite a quality.
Oh, I think it is. I think
Yeah.
it's genuinely
Yeah.
non-judgmental. I think partly because you understand where the other person's coming from.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you're not judging them because you know there's something that's driving them.
Yes.
As long as what Sam has just said is also in place,
Yes.
that it really is truly so. It's not a bypassing so that you don't have
Not
to
an
get
avoiding.
in. Yes, yeah.
And you're also good listeners too. Is that right? You're good listeners?
So they say. People tend to tell. I think
Yeah.
we can tell us
Yes.
that we're good
But
listeners.
do you enjoy listening to people?
It's easy. It's a way of.
Yeah.
It's a way of making the situation feel harmonious, making any kind of environment feel harmonious.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure about the judgmental bit. I think that maybe it's because I have a one wing that I've come across as judgmental sometimes. I don't know. Do you all do you have that, or do you genuinely feel not judgmental?
I distrust my non-judgmentalness sometimes. You know, I feel that I've sacrificed truth for harmony. If I really, really look at it, sometimes I'm really trying to be absolutely more, and that means feeling myself more, to really know.
So can you give a practical example about how, if you were more truthful to yourself, the situation may appear less harmonious, or you might appear less
The
harmonious.
thing that comes up is a long time ago, so that's not a very... But the first thing that came up, I lived running a small growth centre with 2 other people, and they were together, and I was a sort of... And sometimes it got pretty difficult. Now, for me, my terror was the whole thing was to keep things harmonious. Even if I could feel, I could see what was going wrong, it was more important not to rock the boat. My 8 partner would come in, and for him the whole thing was to see the truth and to see what was really happening. And I used to get terrified of that all my whole existence was sort of disappear if things were rocked. And now I really see the moments that I have to stand and say, this is what I feel, and I can do that more. But it's still frightening, because that tendency to want harmony and that sort of smoothing things over, particularly when I get very anxious, to sort of feel smooth and silky and yeah.
So let's talk more, Dottie, about the potential for the Type 9. You talked about in your introduction about the other ways in which the Type 9 can move forward from the neurotic, let's say, neurotic patterns we all learn when we're quite young.
Yeah, from this whole set of programs.
Yes, yeah.
I think the key thing when you're and using the Enneagram as a tool is awareness. Mm-hmm. If you're aware of what your behaviour is, then you can actually start to do something about it.
Let's keep it very basic. When you say awareness, for someone that's watching, doesn't know what awareness is, what does awareness mean to you?
It's like the story I was telling about when I have a challenge and I will feel sleepy.
Yes.
If I'm not aware that this is just a behaviour pattern kicking in, this is an avoidance, if you like. So having the awareness that this is a pattern of mine, that I feel sleepy when I'm challenged, means that I can go, okay, I've clocked that, I'm aware of it.
Okay,
I know that's a pattern of behaviour. It's not, in a sense, it's when the behaviour is driving you and you recognise that the behaviour is driving you. So something like the falling asleep is a classic one. So I think the first thing is awareness. Other ways towards...
You've got to practice that, really, haven't you?
You have.
It's like a muscle that needs to be used.
It's like Sam saying, when I said, do you have to consciously think, okay, today this is what I am... Yeah. It's something, it doesn't come automatically. But also in terms of potential, I've lost my train of thought now. What was I going to say? That's very nine-ish.
I think that they have a huge capacity. We have a huge capacity to act and to act decisively and to carry other people along with us. And that capacity to see where they are and to see what they're feeling as you move forward on a project or a decision, or is great and is it's perfectly possible to act and to come to bring your position forward.
I think looking at the physicality, I mean, I think other Enneagram programs have explained how the Enneagram types fall into ruled by the head, the heart, or the gut.
Okay.
The 9 is ruled by the gut, and down here, and that refers to how disconnected you are from your body, or how connected you are in your body. And for 9s, the tendency is to be disconnected from the body. So what's important for 9s is to get into their bodies, to actually physically be present. And that may be through grounding exercises, it may be through doing physical exercise. So actually going running or doing yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, all those sort of things are really good to actually give the 9 the sense of being physically present.
So it's taking them out of here and bringing them down, as you said, down to the ground.
Being physically present, and that's being down in the gut, which is in yoga you call it the hara.
One word, yes.
The hara. And I can't remember what it is in Qigong, but there's a similar word for it. It's this sense of being grounded, being very physically present.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important in terms of developing the potential for the 9. and I'm sure there are lots of other modalities that help, but fundamentally the Enneagram really, it's like it gives you an understanding of where you are. I remember I was driving through London, which is something very unfamiliar to me, and I got completely lost. So I rang up a friend, because I was going into that sort of state, rang up a friend, and I said, "Can you help me? I'm lost." And he said, "Where are you?" And I said, "I'm lost. I don't know where I am." But what the Enneagram can be, it's a bit like having your sat-nav, because what the Enneagram says is this is where you are. It gives you an understanding of where you are.
Okay.
And it can guide you from where you are
To where you want to go.
where you want to be.
Yeah.
But there will be different ways of getting there.
Yes.
But the Enneagram can be part of that process. There may be other modalities that you use in order to achieve that, but at least the Enneagram is there to show you where you are and how you can, where you can move forward. You can move out of this space of being inertia. Like the oyster at the bottom of the sea, you know, that just sort of sits there and the water washes around it. But it's a nice thing I feel about the 9 is that you're the oyster, but if there is that stimulation in there, so it's the grain of sand, that stimulation, then the oyster will create a pearl. Because 9s are capable of achieving amazing things. We're not all asleep, but you have to wake up in order to do it. And that's what the Enneagram...
And I think for me the nice thing about and just to say that I don't think it's a steady linear progression upwards.
No.
It's over the last couple of months, just lots of up and down, and but the nice thing about for me about connecting with a sense of self or a sense of identity is that at the same time that means that my relationships with other people are richer. They're more, I don't want to say profound, but they're richer. They're more alive, and life in general is more alive because of that tuning into oneself.
And how practically have you done that? How's the grounding work for you on the practical basis?
How do I do it?
Yes.
It's communication with people who know me well, to think together. Meditation, very, very useful in raising or bringing awareness to what the internal processes or internal dialogue is, and not shying away from conflict, not backing away and going into the usual modes of trying to avoid it or get out of it.
So it takes
being willing to face difficulty.
It takes a degree of courage, doesn't it? Would you say that was an issue for you, Cate? That courage you have to.
Definitely. And the other thing I was just thinking for me is, particularly when I get sort of overwhelmed, my tendency is to not do the most important thing. Yes. I'll procrastinate. I'll do everything else. And just to really realise that and to sit down and think what is the most important thing, and not to run away and do all the other things, but to just focus on what is really important, and to face that. I think for me it is so much about awareness and so much about really facing conflicting, daring to say things that I didn't used to dare to say, and the aliveness that comes with that.
That must be quite enjoyable as well.
It is. It's hugely, but it's at that moment almost like going back into my patterns, or actually really staying there. I mean, focusing to me is a word that I really, really need.
That expression where the attention goes, the energy follows.
Yes.
If your attention is out here,
yes.
That's where your energy's going. So it's
yes, because it used to be, and it still can be when I'm sort of panicky, that people could follow what I've done, because I've done this and then suddenly thought of something else, so left that not finished, and then done the next thing. It's sort of like, and to actually really finish something is.
In some of my homework, I was reading, I'm going to show these books at the end. I can't claim to have read them all, but I was dipping in and out last couple of days on type 9s in these books, and the word real action came up
Yes.
quite a bit. So I don't know if you want to talk about what real action means to you, Dottie.
Well,
you seem to be fired up by this word.
When I first came across it, when you first start learning the Enneagram, this is what you're meant to be doing, is real action. You think, well, what is it? To actually understand what real action is. And it was actually Almas, I think, there's a quote from Almas, explaining what real action is. And real action is, it's sort of connected to the being in your body, to actually grounding yourself in the body. Real action is when you know what to do without actually having to go through a process of thinking. I'm not there yet, because I think as you're studying through the 9, and as Sam was saying, I have to think at the beginning of the day, this is what I'm going to do. It's still a thought process. We haven't got to the stage of the knowing, which is the right action that we're working towards. Although, having been working with it a number of years, I'm now getting glimpses of that. I'm actually, I knew what to do and I did it.
Without thinking.
Without thinking.
It happens.
It does. It just happens
without any.
Yes. So I'm starting to find that I'm doing that more. And when it happens, you know, that's what that feels like.
Yeah.
So in a sense, it's easier to do it again because you know what it feels like.
So it becomes familiar somehow.
It becomes familiar because
Yes.
that's what you're working with, isn't it? When you're doing any sort of development, is the negative, if you like, has become familiar. So I stick with that. So it's actually then changing that so that the positive becomes familiar, and then it becomes easy. So it's going through that barrier that Cate was talking about, of the fear of making waves by saying what I want. The fear of saying no to somebody because they might be angry with me. So going through that and actually finding that the world doesn't fall apart. It's okay, but you have to, and then the more you do it, the easier it becomes. It's the same, isn't it? And then you get the positive reinforcement of, that feels good.
And particularly when you were talking about right action or real action, because the more present I can be, and really then it happens.
Yes.
So there's none of this. I mean, it can easily dip into that again, but somehow it is extraordinary. The more present I am, it can just happen. I don't have to go through all these the procrastinating and the.
And I think
And
the
so
wonderful thing
pleasant.
is, when you're looking at the other types in the Enneagram, they're listening to us saying this, thinking, well, I don't feel like that's true. I have no problem making decisions. And it's recognising how different we are from other people, isn't it? Yeah.
I think that's one of the great values of the Enneagram. I know when I discovered my Enneagram type, it was really quite a relief that there was at least a ninth of the people around the world actually did function and feel maybe in a similar way to me.
Yes.
When I didn't always realise that, I felt that maybe it was just me that was odd and different from other
Yes,
people. But when you realise that, it's about 12% of the world's population is roughly your type.
Your type.
Yeah, about 8% actually, isn't it? Yeah. So how is it for people to be close to type 9s, do you think?
Frustrating, probably a lot of the time,
yes.
because you can go along with what they want to do. The 9 will go along with what the
Yes.
partner or friend wants to do, and then discover that actually the 9 doesn't want to do that. So that's frustrating. Just not being able to know really what the 9 is feeling is very hard.
So you tend to be, I guess, then, knowing both of your partners, they both seem to be quite opinionated, spirited people. So you're drawn to people that are more in touch with their feelings at one level. So that's something that maybe attracts you to them because they seem to be more assertive and in touch. Would you say that's true? Or
I don't know. I don't know about if there's a better type or types that 9s tend to be drawn towards. I can't comment. I don't know. Do you?
I wasn't thinking so much as a particular type, but just knowing both of your partners, yours better than Sam's. They just feel that yours is very in touch with her feelings. Norman is very certainly
Assertive.
should we say? Yes.
I
Yeah.
think it's interesting because I always remember my father saying, "Why are all your friends much stronger than you?" And I never really thought about it. You know, he said, "What is it?" And for me, I still don't. I think for me, being with somebody who is really able to say what he thinks and stuff, it does help me. I also feel very safe because I know exactly where he is. There's a sort of honesty about it.
That's certainly true for me. I appreciate knowing exactly where
You are.
my partner is
Yeah.
coming from. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's very useful for a peacemaker to know exactly where one person is.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that uncertainty that I have is taken away by the certainty that
Yeah.
the other person has.
Yeah. I think what you say is very interesting, actually, because I think people come towards nines because people say, I mean, I always think I'm boringly unthreatening. But then probably with other people, there's this incredible frustration.
Who are you? Where?
Well,
what?
exactly.
Where's the
Blancmange,
where's
it's
the
the
person?
blancmange.
Yes.
This fog of a person.
Yeah.
What are you actually? Who's there?
Yeah.
That's what I hear from.
Yeah, my first
People who know
husband
me
used to
well.
get really, really cross with me because he'd say, "Well, what do you want to do?" I said, "No, I don't mind. Whatever you want to do. Do you want to get?" And actually, I think one of the things there's somebody says what's good for nines is if you give them a choice. If you say, "What do you want to do?" and you can do anything, it's like, I have no idea. But if you say, "Would you like to go swimming, horse riding, or mountain climbing?" they'll go, "Oh, I think we'll go swimming." So when you're given a choice, it's much easier. So somebody's actually giving you something to choose between rather than, "Ooh, that's just all too much to have to choose." But yeah, he used to get really angry with me. I think he was at 8. But I became more and more and more invisible. You know, you've come through your relationship and you've found your strength. But that marriage ended because I'd almost disappeared. I really had. Because he was very strong and I just gave in.
Yeah.
And he got cross.
I think it's probably mind-boggling to some other types that that nines just don't no, they don't have a sense of identity. They don't have a strong sense of self. It's just
Well, it's the unity, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you think about duality and non-duality, that the nines want this sense of non-duality. That is complete unity, and a loss of individuality to a degree, isn't it? And if that's part of us, then you can see how you've lost that, the little bit that's me somehow. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, the whole non-duality thing is very interesting. But how does a person, how does a nine fit into that nine dual? How does a strong sense of self exist at the same time as this non-dual reality? That's what I am trying to crack.
You know the Rumi one,
No.
from Rumi, where he says it's a little poem that you're the drop of rainwater, and the drop of water falls into the ocean, so it becomes part of the ocean, but it is also still that drop, and that's the bit that sort of fries your brain a bit, isn't it? That you are connected, but you're also connected and separate at the same time. That's what's tricky.
So I brought a pile of books here, and it's going to show some of these to the camera. We won't finish just yet. We've got a few minutes left, but I know this book, The Enneagram Made Easy, which is one of my favourites. I know you said you also enjoyed them, because it really is for someone that doesn't know much about the Enneagram, and it has some cartoons in there and very simple questions. And I think to find your Enneagram type is probably one of the best starting points. It doesn't go into a great deal of depth, but certainly it's a great starter. And then there was, I brought along 2 books by Sandra Maitre about the Enneagram. One is The Enneagram of Passions and Virtues and The Spiritual Dimension of the Enneagram. And these both very much take more what Dottie was talking about at the beginning, the spiritual side of it, the bigger picture. We've touched on that now towards the end, the potential, if you like. And you also mentioned non-duality, how it fits in with non-duality. So these two books, if you know your type and you want to learn more, they're probably very good ones to further exploration. And there's the book that by, I think Cate referred to A.H. Almass, Facets of Unity, which in a way goes further than Sandra Maitre's books, much more detail on the spiritual side and the bigger picture. And this one that I haven't read, but I hear is quite good, The Wisdom of the Enneagram, The Complete Guide to Psychological and Spiritual Growth for the 9 Personality Types by Don Richard Ariso and Russ Hudson. So there's a few books there. Any last little... We have about 3 minutes left. Any last little comments you want to make?
Can I ask you a question?
You may ask me a question.
What do you think about 9s, having had this
Well,
talk
it
with
was very
us?
interesting about how I felt during the interview, because usually I'm quite assertive in these programs. I try not to be. I try and let them flow. But I felt my assertiveness going in the background. I thought I was becoming 9 type.
You're in training to the 9 energy.
I thought that was very interesting how you guys had influenced a part of me, which of course I have, as we were saying at the beginning, we all have each type in us. It's just one type predominant.
Yeah.
And I was feeling very 9ish. I'm going, shall I ask them this? Shall I go there? But he wasn't quite sure.
Well, that's a wonderful expression of what 9ishness can be like, isn't it?
Yes, but it's good because I think very much one of the aims of this series we're doing on the Enneagram, the 9 different types, isn't to come up with all the right descriptions and the right answers. It's to give viewers a feel for these types, and it is very much sometimes the feeling of something that feels right, and I think that came across very well here.
Good.
So we have about 2 minutes. Do you want any sort of words of wisdom from the other side of the bench there?
It just makes you think when you say that how easy it is to be with other 9s in a way. And I always remember ages ago there were 4 of us in a car leaving a retreat, and the car obviously wasn't, smoke was coming out and goodness knows what. And 2 people immediately, I think there was an 8 and a 6, got out of the car and said, "We can't go with you." The driver was a 9 and I was a 9, and we decided just to go. and it wasn't terrible, and we had such fun. But because, I mean, there was none of that sort of, oh, well, this is what's happening, so let's go along with it. And I just was suddenly thinking, when you said you'll become more 9ish, that...
Do you sometimes... Oh, sorry, I might be wandering somewhere else, but when you're with a group of 9s, you're not trying to be anything else?
No, it's...
So do you sometimes find it tiring if you're with a lot of people? Because you're sort of holding the space for everybody, and then you...
Well, I suppose what I feel is I like being with people enormously, but it's very relaxing if you let them all get on with it, and you're still sort of part of it all without having to do anything.
Okay. I think we're going to finish on that note.
Okay.
Really appreciate the 3 of you coming in to be on Conscious TV and share your 9ishness with the world. And thank you again for watching Conscious TV, and do look out for the other programs in this Enneagram series, which we've done most of them now, but we'll be finishing them off fairly soon. Thank you and goodbye.